It definitely, in just talking with other atheists, and especially because recently I've become part of the community a little bit more here in Orange County. As soon as any kind of whiff of dogma or social structure starts to come up, you can just see the distrust in people's eyes start to bloom.
Well, when you meet people, personally, I love to meet people, especially on airplanes, because you're stuck with them next to them for 3 or 4 hours. They're not going anywhere. And I start out gently, but eventually it turns to religion, especially if I have a God book in front of me or something that says God in the title. And I usually actually admit that I not only am an atheist, but I'm an atheist advocate. But I always put on a great persona because I am a nice guy. I'm a moral, good person.
Yeah.
I live my life to the fullest, I believe, and I don't need any supernatural deity to do it. And when these people say, wow, I see some militant atheists on TV and you're nothing like them, and so you're just like a regular guy, and I go, well, I guess I am a regular guy, but all atheists, or I should say most atheists are like that. The ones that you see on the TV are extreme because they're anti-God, they're anti-religion, and some of them are so militant. I'll give an example. Madeleine O'Hara, I don't know if you were alive when she was around.
I believe she was the person who started American Atheist.
American Atheist, that's correct.
I've heard about her, but
she
yes,
was
you're
militant.
Right. Yeah.
And she had some pretty wild ideas that even I don't agree with in the way of her sexual ideas and her morals that way. But she actually did more in the way for atheists than on the legal system by 1963, which we've talked about in another episode about the removing church from all of our government institutions, eliminating prayer in schools, for instance. And that was a very pivotal position. Unfortunately, she paid the price for it, and she was actually murdered by a person who thought she was not human. Her bookkeeper, actually, part-time bookkeeper.
Yeah, I mean, and so, essentially that militant view that's what you see on the news. Yeah. I think to a certain extent it's something that we as atheists need to remember. The flip side is true about theists and Christians, at least
of
Christians
course, there's
in this
extremists on every side.
Exactly.
And that's what brings the news, brings in the news. If you, for instance, it was only 3.5 weeks ago that there was a man that went in a Universalist, Unitarian Universalist church, and he thought they were all atheists, so they wanted to kill all of them. He wanted to kill all of them, and he did kill 2 people, and that is an extremist. In fact, that is basically the American Taliban starting its work, because instead of a suicide bomber, and as Islamic or a Muslim a suicide bomber, funny thing is you don't see any Jewish suicide bombers, and you absolutely do not see any atheist suicide bombers. In fact, there hasn't even been a war in the annals of history that actually say, let's go kill these other people because we're atheists and they should be atheists. It's the other way around, obviously. You can't call people to a non-God or a non-religion to do anything.
It's very hard to tug at someone's emotions with, there is no afterlife. It's nothing. There is no soul. There is no spirit. There is no one watching over you.
Well, let's just talk about the soul. Heaven and hell, that's a pretty easy thing to either not disprove but not believe in because they're so mythical. It goes back way before Christianity. But the soul, when people say we have no soul, they think that we don't have any morals, and morals is linked to the soul somehow. And it wasn't until I discovered the definition of a soul. Now, what is your definition before I tell you mine?
I think it tends to be the fairly standard American definition of, a spirit that is outside the physical material realm that is essentially you at your greatest essence, your mental faculties.
So if I said you had no soul, that means you're probably immoral and have no sense of well-being, or you don't have a spiritual guidance behind you.
That's definitely how we tend to connote it within this nation. Within the Western mindset in general. Well,
my particular definition, which I totally agree with yours, is that something that leaves the body when you die, or something that, or I should say, and in fact, something that is implanted in you when you're fertilized as an egg and a sperm. To me, that's such a superstition, and the belief that you're born with some type of soul and sin. It's like you have good and bad in you, when you die. It's total myth, total superstition, totally rational, and you really have to be fed it all your life to believe in it. If I came to you, how old are you right now?
22.
Alex? 22, and you had no exposure to religion, but you were a rational person, educated person, and I said, did you know there was a soul when you were fertilized?
It would just blow your mind.
It would say, wait, let's back up a little bit. You believe that what exactly happens? And to this day, I get so many different definitions of how that particular, well, of course, God did it, that's the big one, but you know, what happens when this soul enters your fertilized egg?
I mean, it's kind of funny when you're talking with, I mean, specifically Christians or other religious people in general, you know, they think that their religious views are, oh, they make total sense. You know, so then you take something, say, Scientology, that just seems like a complete joke, and they'll say, oh yeah, it's totally irrational, makes no sense. I mean, how could any of this had actually happened? You know, aliens being tossed into a volcano and their spirits, you know, going out and spreading over the world and implanting in people. And that's one part of, you know, part of Scientology, and it's absolutely ridiculous. But at its face value, so is Christianity, so is Islam, so is Judaism. They're all equally just ridiculous when you take a look at the vast quantity of scientific knowledge. You know, and so to say that, oh, this one is somewhat more so than the others doesn't really make a whole lot of sense. I mean, you might get into, I guess, in a particularly morbid way, counting the bodies in terms of doing, you know, which religion has done the most damage, and that's an argument that's going to be going on forever.
Well, I think it's Christianity, but
probably. But
I know that in the Bible, somebody counted up the deaths in the Bible. On one hand, they counted all the people that died because God basically killed them.
Yeah.
And on the other hand, they counted the amount of people that God told other people to kill. And it turns out that it's 371,482 people that God killed in the Bible on his own. Remember, he flooded the world in the ark, and that killed everybody except for 8 people. That's kind of a hard thing to swallow there.
That's another one. Numbers up. Yeah.
And then the other one was 1.8 plus million people. 1.8 million plus people.
That's just within the Bible.
That's just within the Bible, of course. Not counting the Inquisition, not counting the Crusades, of course. The Inquisition alone was, they don't know exactly because there were no records kept, but it was 35 to 55,000 people just in the Inquisition alone. Tens of thousands in the Crusades, and this was all in the name of God.
Yeah,
you know, and
very directly.
And of course, the most recently is 9/11 in the name of Islam. I do not believe that Osama bin Laden actually used political force. He used religion to get these people to do what he wanted politically. So it was a religious political motivation of Osama bin Laden, but it was the religious people that believed in the heaven so much, that their particular heaven, that they went and did this. They think that they would be getting a highway to heaven.
Which is essentially, you know, kind of what you start to see throughout history, is that religion has just been a tool used in a lot of ways. The people who might be using religion as a tool might also fundamentally really believe as well. And that's its own, to a certain extent, scary fact. But the fact of the matter is, religion is definitely, it's something that gets to your emotions. It
does.
Immediately just crosses over everything that normally makes you a rational person and just says, okay, I'm going to do this from the heart, from the soul, as it were. And so that's where you start to get into a lot of problems. You know, and so, but trying to take a step back from that, and going back to what we were talking about definitely earlier, most people aren't like that, nowadays at least, you know, and so we need to live with each other, especially in this country.
Well, that's one thing about atheists. Atheists can live very peacefully with anybody, because we accept people that they will not change their religion. That's what this show is not about. This show is not about converting anybody. Again, people will change on their own. Only through self-exploration and self-actualization will somebody come to the conclusion, a rational conclusion, that there are no gods. It's a big step for people, because if you have a personal relationship with Jesus, you talk with Jesus, and hopefully he does not talk back. I mean, you can talk to dead people like John Edwards does, and anybody can do that. It's when they talk back.
That becomes a little scarier.
Yeah, because suppose that I started hearing voices. As a strong atheist, what would I do if I started hearing voices? what would you do?
I'd probably check myself in.
Exactly, my sentiments exactly. I would check myself in. I would know it's not a God. You know, how many times have people actually said, well, let's take one big guy, Bush. God told him to go to war in Iraq. That's actually truth. I mean, he said it. He said it on record. And for those that don't believe that, just type in Google, did Bush hear from God, you know, about the Iraq war. My wife actually didn't believe that until I actually had to Google it and prove it to herself.
And show her the little clip.
Well, that's all the time we have for Alex today. Thank you very much, Alex, for coming in the show.
Glad to be here.
And you were very entertaining. You have lots of knowledge. I think that I'm going to have you on another show because it seems like you have so much knowledge. You're only 22, and I'm actually pretty proud of you supporting your atheist community in the University of California, Irvine. I'll see you on the next show then.
I'll be here.